Hello and welcome to STA 2023. I'm Jim Shorkey. I'm going to be your professor for this semester, and the book that we are using is Stats Modeling the World, 5th edition. So let's go ahead and get started with Chapter 1. Stats starts here. So what is or are statistics? Well, statistics is really about how to think clearly with data. And of course, the next question may be, well, what is data? So data is any collection of numbers, characters, images, or items that provide any information about something. Statistics is about variation. So it's largely about how to explain why data vary. Some variation we can explain, some variation we can't explain. And later in the book, we're going to talk about how to control variation. And that's going to be important when we start talking about experiments. How do we control variation so that we're really only measuring what we want to measure and we're not allowing any outside forces to come in there and skew or impact our results? So data is being collected and used constantly. Some examples here may be online marketing. Websites are capturing you when you visit the site, or not just you, but anybody really. And they're tracking products that you or any other customer buys online. Brick and mortar stores also capture data when their customers join a store rewards program or when customers purchase products with a credit or a debit card. All of that information is then collected, and the retailers build profiles on their customers based on their shopping preferences. And then they use this information to target market their customers. Another way that a retailer may use data that they collect is if they have a certain number of products that they like to keep on the shelf or in stock. When that count gets down to a certain level, because they're tracking each time that item gets purchased, they know what their inventory is, and then they know that it's time to reorder so that they can restock if they want to keep a certain number of that product on the shelf. Data tables are used to store and organize data with context and clarity. Data table is made up of columns and rows. Each column has a heading or a label that define the data in the column, and then each row represents one case or one observation. So if we look at this example, this is a data table. It's a small data table of some properties that are currently listed for sale. So each row represents one property, and then the column headings represent and label each column, so that brings some context and clarity as to what you're looking at in each column. So for example, if we look at the status column, we can see that it's active, so they're actively for sale. It shows us the address, the subdivision, the heated square feet, the current price, and so forth. So you can look at this small data table and understand what it is that you're looking at. So try to imagine looking at this data table without the column headings or the labels, right? There's no context, there's no clarity. It's just rows and columns of data, and you're really not sure what you're looking at. So the headings and the labels that are at the top are a very important piece of the data table. So when you're looking at data, there are 5 W's that you want to take into consideration for your context. And that's who, what, when, where, and why, if possible. Okay, so let's look at the who and the what. So as we talked about before, the rows of the data table correspond to individual cases about whom, or about which, if we're not talking about people, that we record some characteristics. So think of the data table that we looked at in our example. Our rows correspond to properties, okay? So each property would be a case. Now cases do go by different names. For example, respondents, they would be individuals who answered a survey. We may refer to people who we do an experiment on as subjects or participants. If we do an experiment on something other than a person, then they would be referred to as experimental units. Database terminology frequently calls cases or rows records. Or quite simply, you can just call them what they are. Maybe they're customers or economic corridors or companies. Okay, so in our example, we were looking at properties. Now there's also variables, and variables are the characteristics that we record about each case. So think about our example again. Our variables might be status, right? They were all active. The address, the square footage, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms. Those are all characteristics about each property. Okay. Now there's these two other terms, sample and population. So a sample is a subset of a larger population. So if we think back about the example of the data table that I just showed you, there were 4 properties in there. Well, those 4 properties are a subset or a sample of all of the properties that are currently for sale. So all of the properties that are currently for sale could be your population, and those 4 houses would be your subset or your sample. So a primary concern of statistics is the design of a sound method for collecting data. And we're going to get more into this later in the class. But what I want to stress right now on this is that before you ever start collecting data, before you ever start analyzing data, you really want to think about what are you trying to accomplish. And once you've decided what you're trying to accomplish, what do you need to collect in order to accomplish that? So it's very important to think about the problem before you ever design a survey or before you ever design an experiment. Think about what you're really trying to accomplish. What do I want to do with this information? And then what information do I need in order to do my analysis? And then once you've done your analysis, you want to be able to show and tell others what you found and what you've learned and what's important to them from what you've learned. And we're going to talk a little bit later in the course as well as how to present data. So let's talk a little bit more about variables. There's different types of variables. The first one I want to talk about are identifiers. These are unique values that are going to uniquely identify each record or each case. That could be a customer number or a product number or an invoice number or something else that just uniquely identifies that record. The next here are categorical variables. Now that's going to be either a group or a category. Okay, it can be sex, eye color, hair color, zip code, area code, or something else that just puts that variable into some type of group. It can be either character or numerical. The next one here is quantitative variables. Now those are variables that are measured with numerical values, and they also have a unit. So temperature, currency, length, height, or anything else, it's going to have any type of number and a unit associated to it. So when I say unit, think of temperature. It could either be Celsius or Fahrenheit. Okay. Currency could be in dollars or euros. Length may be, or length and height could be either feet, centimeters, inches, millimeters, something like that. There's some type of unit associated to that number. So a little bit more about variables. We do have some variables that are numeric values, but they can be treated as either categorical or quantitative depending on how they're used. So for example, age can be recorded in years. That's quantitative. It has a number and it has a unit, right? 25 years, 18 years, 32 years, so forth. But you could take that and then categorize it. Okay, so someone who's 12 years old may be put into a child category. Someone who's 16 years old may be put into a teen category. Okay, so depending on how you want to use that data, you could use it as quantitative or categorical, depending on how you categorized your different ages. Another one is a rating system. So have you ever been shopping anywhere or gone somewhere and you get a survey that they want you to fill out? And it may say something like 1 being very dissatisfied all the way up to 5 being very satisfied, and you select how you rate that business based off of your most recent experience. So you have a natural order, 1 through 5, but there's really no units on there. Okay? That's known as ordinal variable. Another example may be, say you're out with some friends and you want to go to a restaurant and you look on Yelp or TripAdvisor or something like that to get some restaurants in the area. Well, they all have ratings on there. So let's say you see a restaurant that has a rating of 4.2 and another restaurant that has a rating of 2.1. Well, you'd probably be safe to say that the one with 4.2 is probably a better restaurant than the one with 2.1. But what you can't say is that it's twice as better because you don't have any units there. Okay, so you can't make the statement, hey, this restaurant's twice as good as this restaurant. All you can say is, well, based off of the ratings, this looks like a better restaurant. How much better? We don't know, right? And that just depends on the number of people who have gone in there and done a rating and what their personal preferences are on the food and so forth. But there still is a rating system. You just can't say something is twice as good, 3 times as good, half as good, or something like that. So that concludes our chapter 1, and I will pick up again with chapter 2. Thank you.